Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
So we're finishing up a series called The Digital Fast, and it's been a focus on taking a look at how like our phones, our digital world affects us, but just not like stopping that, but it's also been a time of looking at, how do we turn our attention to God? And that's really what the time has been, is taking a look at or paying attention to what we are paying attention to, as one person said. Paying attention to what we're paying attention to. And the importance of that is that we grow what we pay attention to. That's the way God made our minds and our hearts, is that what we pay attention to would grow in us. And so today as we finish up, we're finishing up with the theme of determine. And so coming out of a time of evaluating technology and whatnot, it'd be good to determine, what is my relationship with my phone? What is my relationship with technology? And it kind of sounds silly even saying that, right? Like those of you that are maybe a little bit older, midlife like me, it's like to say, what is the relationship with the phone? Back, you had this dial phone, or you type, whatever it is. Maybe you talk, but now it's got everything on there. But a good way to look at it, I think, would be to determine our relationship in the way of utility and distraction. I talked about that the first week, and those of you that have been going through the workbook, remember that utility, these are digital tools or apps that serve a practical, essential purpose in our daily life or work, and whose absence would significantly disrupt our ability to function. Although as I've taken a lot of the distractions off my phone, I spend a lot more time on the weather app, I'm finding. I know a lot more about weather than I ever wanted to know, I find myself going there. Examples of this would be phone calls, texting for essential communication, calendar for scheduling, weather, camera for capturing important moments, GPS, banking apps, airline apps. That kind of stuff is utility. It's something that we need. And when we go there for a purpose. Distraction stuff is activities that tend to pull our attention away from our immediate surroundings and from our tasks and from our relationships. They often lead to mindless consumption or reduced focus in our lives. And those could be social media, games, news feeds, email, video streaming platforms like YouTube, online shopping, web browsers used for non-essential browsing. So for me, like what I've determined is I'm going to keep my work email off my phone. I'm going to keep the social stuff off there because I've just found that it makes me less present with whoever I'm with and whatever I'm doing. And yet, would that really be enough that we determine through this whole thing that it's like, okay, we're just deciding how we interact with our phones and stuff. And, as Christians, our attention is not to fully go to that which is not healthy for us. We're not to major really in the minors. We're not to really just focus on the things and say, well, watch out for that, don't go there. That has wisdom to it for sure, of saying, I need to stay away from that. But I remember John Wimber, Vineyard pastor, said this. He says, it seems the more I think about not sinning, the more I sin. But the more I think about just loving Jesus, the less I seem to sin. Falling in love seems to be the key. So what if the fruit of our time in our series of 4 weeks, 28 days, is that we all love Jesus and receive more love from Jesus? That the stripping away and then because of that, we would be less drawn to things that are just shiny and kind of don't really satisfy. I think that would be good fruit for sure. And by the way, there's 7 days left in the digital fast. And so if you've been doing that, continue. If you've been like, I'm good, you got 7 days or even 1 day to kind of say, what do I need to change with this? So the time we live in is not that all different from the time that Jesus and his disciples lived. Sure, technology is different, cultural differences for sure. But when Jesus was about to go to the cross, John chapter 13, it kind of begins. He's quickly approaching there. And he's having dinner with his disciples. And, you've seen the picture of the Last Supper. And they're leaning in such a way that they can all see him and viewing him. All of their faces are at him, and they were focused on him because they had put all of their, everything into Jesus being the Messiah. And he was the Messiah. The issue, though, is that he wasn't the Messiah in the way that they thought. They thought he was a political Messiah. They thought he was going to start ruling now Messiah. They thought that all of a sudden they wouldn't have any money problems anymore. They wouldn't have any social problems because Jesus was just going to walk very soon into just being king right there, and everybody would recognize and surrender, and everything would change. The Romans would be gone. Life would be different. And yet as Jesus sat there at dinner, he started to download to them something different. One of you will betray me. Is it I, Lord? Is it I? Is it I? And before, and then he washed their feet, and, they're like, uh-oh, this isn't like what a king would do. And so now all of a sudden they're catching in on what's going to happen, and he starts to let them know that he's going to leave, John 14, and he says, look, you believe in God, also believe in me. And, and they say, well, he says, you know where I'm going. He says, we don't know where you're going. He says, no one shall come to the Father except through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then he tells them about the Holy Spirit, and he tells them how, look, you're going to want to come to me, and you're going to want to know me and walk with me, but the relationship's going to be distant. You're not always going to see me face to face how you've been these last 3 years. And so he's wanting them to know how to know him after he's died, he's resurrected, he ascends to heaven, and how to walk with him. And he knows it's time to go at this point. And so they head out into the dark, and you'll know that if you know the story, they head to the Mount of Olives and Garden of Gethsemane. And on the way there, though, they would walk through the Kidron Valley, and amongst other things that, it was Passover, and so they were sacrificing the lambs, and the blood of the lambs would have flowed down the hill from the temple down into the Kidron Valley where the water and blood would flow. And so they probably walked through the blood of lambs as they walked through, the Lamb of God that would very shortly shed his blood would walk through that. And the scene is just so pregnant with just all sorts of meaning. But at one point, he must have walked through a vineyard. And as he walked through the vineyard, he realized, and he probably went from rushing to going slow, and then said, hey, I get it. I get how I can explain to you how you can live with me in the midst of all the distraction, in the midst of the separation that you don't see me face to face. I understand how I can explain this to you. You'll understand it so clearly if you just stop for a second. And so John chapter 15, he says this to them in verse 1. It says, I am the vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. So you imagine he probably stops, and he's referencing just right here, just all the vines and the grapes and everything that's there. And he says, I'm the true vine. And the word true here, alethenos, it means not just by name and resemblance, but by the real nature of something, and it's opposite to what is defective. So Jesus is using a word that's saying like, hey, I'm just not referencing hey, I'm like this, but he's saying, I am this. I am a vine that life and sustenance flows from. In the word vine here, we may think of something small and thin, but the vine of a grapevine is the trunk. It's the part that connects to the roots. And it's the trunk, and then it comes out, and then there's arms that come out of it. That's the vine. And then he says, my Father is the gardener, or it would be the vine dresser. Some versions say the husbandman. And that may be a struggle for some of us, for sure. Because the vine dresser is all about fruit and all about caring for every single part of the grapevine. The vine dresser is attentive, and the vine dresser is gentle and intentional and caring and knows every part of that grapevine intimately. And some of us may struggle with that today because that's just not your view of the Father. It's more that the Father is waiting to get you, or he's upset with you because you haven't performed the way that you should. And you can just never do anything right with the Father. And so the gardener vine dresser is all about the fruit, and fruit would be the thoughts and attitudes and actions that glorify and honor God. Any thoughts, actions, and that would glorify God, that would have the substance of God, the life of God would be in us and into others. Now it says that in verse 2, where there's no fruit in a branch, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. And some of us would say, there it is, I told you. You were saying, yeah, I do have a problem with the Father, but then all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, Cody, there it is. See? No fruit, I'm cutting you off. Not performing, not getting it right, you got it wrong again. How could you do that? What's wrong with you? That's what we see when we read that. But the NIV, like many versions or interpretations, or not interpretations, versions, translations of Scripture, they get it wrong. It doesn't mean cut off. It actually is never used that way. So it's strange that it's this way, but mistakes are made. The word cut off here, airo, it means to raise up. It means to lift up out of the dirt, to receive sunlight and bear fruit in the context of a grapevine. What a different picture. I mean, think how that preaches different. If you don't bear fruit, the Father's going to cut you off. Or if you don't bear fruit, the Father's going to come to you gently, lift you up out of the dirt, lift you up out of the mud, and lift you up and connect you closer to where the sustenance is, where you can receive the warmth of the sun and what you need, photosynthesis, so you can grow. I mean, what a different picture. What a different picture of God. What a different picture of you. You see, the vine dresser would see that every single branch is way too valuable to just cut off in that way. And so some of us may feel that way today. And granted, like if you're anything like me, I mean, you probably got yourself there. You know? Probably said, well, that'll be a good idea. Or, hey, that won't matter. And yet, after a while, you know, you're in the dirt, you're in the mud, and your thinking's off, your actions are off, or just everything about it is off. And yet God intervenes time and time again, doesn't he? He intervenes, and it's a weird picture because we know that God doesn't force himself. But you do see, you know, it's kind of like he will pick us up, but then we also have the will that we could just go back down if we wanted to. But it's a process. God will warn us. God will speak to us and say, hey, you know, that's probably not good for you. Or, hey, that'll damage you. That'll damage others. That'll hurt. I got it. Just let me try this out for a bit. And in my own life, what I've experienced, the voice of God, which is like, are you done yet? You know, are you done? I mean, is that helping you thinking that way? Is that helping you doing that? And then, okay, Lord, here I am again. Take my heart. And he lifts it up. He doesn't cut anything off. But then, too, what about the branches that are bearing fruit? He says every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. And prunes means to cut back or cleanse. And I think this is the hardest for a lot of Christians is that we look at our lives and we start to bear some fruit, and then some things come into our lives that things don't work out, or we hit limits, or what we thought was going to happen with this would happen, or people do things to us, or relationships break, And the thing is that an immature branch just says, man, what is wrong? Or I must have done something wrong, or God is not good. But a mature branch says, yes, let it come. Let it come. Let there be more fruit. Because you know that pruning brings more fruit. And the more mature a branch is, the more pruning it needs, and because the more fruit it can bring. And so the person that has their life pruned actually starts to, over time, as you start to recognize what's going on, like you'll be able to look at your life and you say, oh, now you should do inventory. Like if things happen in your life, you should say, okay, have I been doing something? Is my thinking off, or my actions off? Or, like, is there something that's off with me, Lord? Is there any unconfessed sin? Is there any activities, anything habitual? Yeah, you should go through that and do an inventory for sure. And as you look at your heart and say, no, I think things are good. And as you look at it and say, oh, God is caring for me. God is working in me that more fruit may come. And so the cutting back is never fun, though, is it? It's never fun. But over time, what you realize is that it's not about actually your fruit, though. Because that would be a misapplication of this. That it's I'm cutting back and I'm going to get more of my fruit and more of the things that I want. No, it's the cutting back and the cleansing so that more of God's fruit would flow in your life. It would flow in my life. More of his fruit would come. And so what happens through pruning, and it's an important part of spiritual growth, is that we start to realize and we stop approaching Jesus to get things from him. Like more and more of our prayers are not about, hey, God, can you get this for me? Can you do this for me? Like he's like a means to an end. But more and more of our seeking him is he's the end. Isn't that a big difference, isn't it? That's what pruning does, is because as stuff gets taken away, you start to realize like, yeah, blessed be the name of the Lord. He gives and he takes away. And what's left is him. There's a picture of a vine with grapes here I wanted to show you, and pretty abundant, right? And so, right, the vine is the trunk there coming up, and and then you have the branches that go out, and you see the green straps there, right? And you see wire. You see the vine dresser is pulling up and working so that the branches are able to bear their fruit, and just beautiful. And yet the next picture, you see the branches on the ground, and yet you say, well, what are all those cut off for? But you look up closer and you see that they're not fully cut off. They've been pruned. And Luke, just leave that up there. And the trunk is the permanent part. And then there's more technical terms. There's a whole minutia we can get into. I'm not going to do it. I promise. Not going to do it. But the trunk rises to arms. Are you starting to get what I'm putting down here? What do you see? What do you see in that? Look at that trunk and look how it comes up and look how it spreads out. And then the top of the trunk is many times called the crown. And what did Jesus say? He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. So do you see the cross? None of this is just by accident. None of it is coincidence. It's that when Jesus says, I am the vine, and he's not saying I'm like a vine. He's saying, I am a vine. That sustenance and life comes through. And then, did you hear what we sung today? That forgiveness flows through your veins, Jesus. That forgiveness flows through your veins. So Jesus is it. He's the true vine. He's the one that has all the sustenance that we need for life and growth and abundance. He has it all. In Christians, if you're not a Christian today and listening in, you're learning how Christians are in relationship with Jesus and how he works and he grows them spiritually. So I'm primarily speaking to Christians today. And so Christians, we know this. Like we look at that and we know that Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. We've heard it so many times and yet we're to get our sustenance from him. And yet the spirit of our age is one of distraction. It's like Proverbs 26:15, where it says, a sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He is too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. Just everything I need is right there. It's in the bowl, it's in the dish, but I'm just, I just can't. The state of so many Christians is one of deception, and we're distracted to the point of spiritual sloth and apathy. It's true. It hurts, but it's true. We are an apathetic, slothful spiritual lot because of the great distraction that is around us. I mean, the simplicity of just knowing God has gone away. I mean, we kind of mess everything. Like even no offense to Life Church, but the Bible app. When the Bible app first came out, you used to be able to people, hey, download the Bible app right there and you can read the Bible. And then now you open the Bible app and it's like, do this, and just, can I just like connect with God? Yeah, here's 850 billion ways. And you feel like you're trying to choose a cracker at the store, right? Would I take Michelle has to come find me in stores sometimes. Well, I don't know which one to get. Well, just choose one. Right, but this one is this many cents per ounce, and this one's this, and this one doesn't have gluten, and this is, you just get caught there. And no, I just want to connect with God. And you say, but yeah, that's so helpful. It is in some ways if the purpose is to do that. But people interacted with God and knew Jesus for like thousands of years before all of these distracted ways to know him. And so even our best efforts seem to draw us away. And you say, well, on my phone, I'm watching sermons and I'm doing these things. And I'll just tell you, you don't need another sermon. Come keep getting sermons, don't get me wrong. Listen to people that are encouraging to you. Watch those if they teach the word, for sure. But listen, we need to do what we know. We need to focus in on that. We need to actually lean into him. We don't need more information. We have so much information, and yet we're so distracted. So these are all good things, but they're not really needed for what we really need. See, what we need is intimacy. Intimacy of our souls with the living God. You see, all the trappings, all the stuff. You ever go fishing before? If you don't get your gear ready, it's a mess. I took my boys fishing when they were little, and we got all the stuff. I got the poles the night before, and God spoke to my heart. He goes, hey, this probably isn't about catching fish, Cody. I'm like, oh, yes, it is, Lord. They're going to have pictures of the biggest fish ever. They're going to, all this stuff. So we go. I take all three of them. Michelle's relaxing. I'm like, we'll see you later with fish. Get the stove ready. And we go out to this little dock, and I set up their poles, and I forgot something in the car. And I'm like, boys, just leave the poles in the water. Don't touch them. Yes, Dad. And they're like this, The youngest is like 3 or 4. I'm going to go get this. Take me 30 seconds. Okay? Just leave them in the water. If something pulls, just pull it and do this, okay? No problem. I'm walking up the hill. 10 seconds later, the oldest one says, Dad, that one of the younger ones did something. And I look, and all 3 poles are crossed 800 million ways, back and forth. And we didn't do anything the whole day. Actually, no, we caught one fish, and it was like that. See, it wasn't about fishing. It was about intimacy with my sons. It was about a memory. It was about time with them. It wasn't about that. And somehow we've lost that when it comes to God, that it's become an experience instead of being with him and really knowing him. And so Jesus says in verse 4, he says, remain in me, and as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So this passage is often people will look at it for soteriological gold. In other words, like soteriology is like the theology of salvation. And they'll look and just like, okay, well, okay, if you do this, Jesus is speaking to Christians. He's speaking to his disciples. And so I think it's very simple. He's not trying to give some deep theological meaning about who's saved and who's not saved, and can you lose your salvation, all this stuff. It's understood best as a clear and simple statement by Jesus. Remain or abide in me. And it's an imperative. It means it's a command. He says to his disciples, abide in me, remain in me. And so one in right relationship or thinking with Jesus knows what to do and does it, which is to just remain and be in him. I remember a couple of years ago, I was experiencing really high blood pressure, and I had like a thing to check my blood pressure at night, and I made ribs for one of my son's birthdays, and man, ever since then, Bill made me some low sodium rub. Thank you, Bill. So I was just flying. It was like 200 something over. It was just through the roof. It's like 3 a.m. And so Michelle, we went to the hospital. I'm like, man, something's wrong with me. And so anyways, got that all set, but I'll check it every once in a while. And my dog and one of my cats, every time I've got the blood pressure thing up here on this cabinet, I grab it. As soon as I grab that, no matter what time of day it is, I pull it down. My dog and one of my cats comes running from wherever they are. And while I'm taking my blood pressure, they cozy up to me. Isn't that interesting? I don't have to tell them what to do. They remember that night, like, okay, he's having issues. So every time I do that now, they just know to do that. That's the way God made them, is to care, is to comfort. Or they're just making sure, okay, who's going to feed us if you fall over, I mean, I don't know, one or the other, okay? But that's how we are to be with Jesus. When we are in relationship with him, is that we come to him and the book tells us we linger. Right? It uses the term linger, that Jesus is calling us to linger. And to linger means to stay in a place longer than necessary because of a reluctance to leave. You have friends like that man, I just don't want to leave. You have friends or family members that have passed on that you're just like, man, I remember when we used to be together. I just never wanted to leave. That's how Jesus is telling us to be with him, but he's also telling us that that's how he is with us. He says, abide in me or remain in me. And he says, and I remain in you. So he goes first. Now, if we don't remain, verse 4, it means that there's no fruit. If we remain in him, verse 5, we'll bear much fruit. So apart from Jesus, verse 5, we can do nothing. So the question here is not so much because he goes through this progression, right? Like in verse 6, if you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. I don't think Jesus is saying like, hey, if you don't, you're going to lose your salvation. I'm done with you. Like, does that really match the heart of Jesus here? No, I think Jesus is answering the question like in the hearts of the disciples, like, I hear what you're saying, but what would happen if I did this? Or what if I don't, right? It's like me when I took jiu-jitsu as a 7th grader and I had Sensei Jim. And Sensei Jim had the biggest beer gut I've ever seen on anybody, just not a sensei. And I said, this guy can't do anything. And I said, hey, Sensei Jim, what would you do if I got like that far and I was on the ground? Sensei Jim had the stuff. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, like, he's answering the question, how bad could it get? And he goes through a progression that, look, this is how bad is that you will wither. It's like this, like life will drain from you. Like a branch is thrown away and then it's sitting there, it's alone, it withers, and then they're picked up, thrown in the fire. He's saying like you won't have any life in you. Like, do you really want to do that? It's like a pastor's son that I was friends with in my early 20s, and we would go to this Bible school we went to for 9 months. And during that time, actually it was before that, he was like, man, I've never partied before. And I said, well, look, I've done enough for me, you, and your block. And you don't want to do it. Like you don't want to like live that way. You don't, he's like, yeah, but I just want to know what it's like to really be wild. I'm like, no, you don't. And I explained to him, I said, look, I said, it's like saying, like, you've never broken your leg. I want to break my leg. I want to experience what that pain is like. So Jesus is saying, like, you want to know what it's like, how bad it can get? This is how bad it can get if we don't abide in him. But then the question is, how good can it get? Well, he says, if you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. Wow. Partner with God. Typically, those things have to do with the things that would benefit others or things that would benefit you because you've allowed yourself to be pruned. A secret is, if you're always meeting your own needs out of the resources that you have, then you're missing out on a whole other thing. Because there's pruning that God does intentionally, but then there's pruning, like you'll start to prune yourself. Man, give me those scissors. Because the stuff that God brings is so much better than anything that you and I can provide for ourselves. Like, even if you have the resources for things or certain things, the next time you want to get something, just say, God, I could get this, but I'm going to just surrender this to you and just ask that you bring me the such and such that I need. Or you do it in such a way. Or you create such, like, in other words, invite him into something very simple and very mechanical that you would do, and just allow him to lead it. And you will say to yourself, wow, how good can it get that I'm loved this way? And that these people are loved this way. Or the people in your life, ask extravagant things for them. The most messed up situation or person and what's happening, just say, Lord, would you do this through that person? Would you help this person? Would you help them see that? And then all of a sudden, the things that you ask, God would do. What a way to live. And yet, it's interesting, over time, we can actually become more about serving Jesus than knowing him. Bruce Wilkerson, pastor and author, reflects that he became an expert at serving God, but somehow remained a novice at being his friend. Whoa. God spoke it to me this way many times. Cody, I don't need a business partner. When I'm so about just serving in ministry, he's like, hey, be my friend. Be with me. And that's why he goes in and he says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. Listen to the words of Spurgeon about this. He says, beloved, you do not dare, could not doubt the love of the Father to his Son. It is one of those unquestionable truths about which you never dreamed of holding an argument. Our Lord would have us place his love to us in the same category with the Father's love to himself. We're to be as confident of the one as of the other. And yet, we doubt God's love, not because it's not there, not because it's not consistent or strong or real, but because we distance ourselves. That's far enough, God. Yet he's calling us deeper in this time. He's calling us deeper. What could God do if with you, with me, if we were ones that lingered with him more? That the heartbeat of our life was one of lingering with him and sitting with him and receiving from him and talking with him. What could he do in you? What could he do in our church? That if we were a church that lingered with him, not only apart but together, that there just wasn't anything that would be more important than that, is lingering and loving and being loved by Jesus. I remember one time I was a new youth pastor, and my friend Bear that was mentoring me, and he comes in and he says to a bunch of us leaders and pastors, and he says, and he would get this often, but sometimes it would be more than others, and he just said, man, I still remember it was like yesterday. He says, I have a word from God for us. Okay? He says he misses us. He misses us. And I remember that day we leaned in and worshiped and met him and laid stuff down and confessed sin and hearts and busyness and so much other stuff, and just, wow. Such are the moments that happen over and over again. And so as we go through this time of looking at where our attention goes, may this be a day, may this be a time that we lean into the love of God and say, Lord, may it be as you desire with me. May I know you, may I walk with you. Would you make me into the person you make me to be? And if you dare, you may pray, Lord, would you take anything out of my life that keeps me from you? I lay it all down that I might give love to you and receive your love.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.